walking in sunlight, sunlight of love. Heavenly sunlight, heavenly sunlight, flooding my soul with glory divine. Hallelujah, I am rejoicing, singing his praises. Jesus is mine. Number 650. First and last verse. There's a call come ringing o'er the restless way. Send the light, send the light. There are souls to rescue, there are souls to save. Send the light, send the light, send the light. The blessed gospel light, let it shine from shore to shore. Send the light, the blessed gospel light, let it shine forevermore. Let us not grow weary in the work of love. Send the light, send the light. Let us gather jewels for a crown above. Send the light, send the light, send the light, the blessed gospel light. Let it shine from shore to shore. Send the light, the blessed gospel light. Let it shine forevermore. For the Lord's Supper, let's sing number 325. All three verses. Boundless love, unending joy. This is my life. It's what I know. I can't believe that he selected me. Jesus, my Lord, it's you I owe. Boundless love, unending joy. This is my life. It's what I know. I can't believe that he selected me. Jesus, my Lord, it's you I owe. Boundless grace because of Calvary. I will be reading from John 12:27-30. Now my soul has become troubled.
And what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour. But for this purpose I came to this hour. Father, glorify your name. Then a voice came out of the heavens. I have both glorified it and would glorify it again. So the crowd of people who stood by and heard it was saying that it had thundered. Others were saying an angel had spoken to him. Jesus answered and said, this voice has not come for my sake, but for your sake. Now judgment is upon this world. Now the ruler of this world will be cast out. And I, if I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all men to myself. But he was saying this to indicate the kind of death by which he was to die.
Heavenly Father, as you have commanded, we meet here on the first day of the week. Take these emblems representing Christ's body and his blood. Let's always remember the suffering that he did on the cross as he died, as he shed his blood for our salvation. Father, as we take of this bread, as we do it, and let's take these Christ and pray.
Right there, collection, we'll sing number 790. Very short song, we'll sing it through twice. 790. Remember the song? Let's go and sing. My heart, my body, my soul, I give to you. Take control. I give my body a living sacrifice. Lord, take control. Take control. My heart, my body, my soul, I give to you. Take control. I give my body a living sacrifice. Lord, take control. Take control. Lord, thank you for this day that you've given us, and thank you for all the many blessings that you have granted upon us, the freedoms that we have, and the joys that we have, and the religious freedoms that we also have, Lord. Lord, let us remember all those many blessings that you've given us, and let us give back a portion of those that you give back to you freely and joyfully, and further the work of your church and the growth and the spreading of your word. Forgive us our many sins, Lord Jesus. You would mark your songbooks to number 989. Our song following Chris's lessons, 989. If you would turn and stand in that order, 851. Stand and turn. 851 for all three verses. Stand only if it's convenient. This is a major request.
Some glad morning when this life is o'er, fly away to a home on God's celestial shore. Fly away. Glory, fly away in the morning when I die. Hallelujah, by and by, I'll fly away. When the shadows of this life have grown, I'll fly away, fly away. My God, from prison bars has flown, I'll fly away. I'll fly away, oh glory, I'll fly away in the morning when I die. Hallelujah, by and by, I'll fly away. Just a few more weary days and then I'll fly away to a land where joy shall never end. I'll fly away. I'll fly away, oh glory. I'll fly away in the morning when I die. Hallelujah, by and by, I'll fly away. Beautiful.
This morning's scripture reading comes from Luke chapter 10. I'd like to follow along. Luke chapter 10, verses 25 through 37. Starting with verse 25. And behold, a certain lawyer stood up and tested him, saying, Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? He said to him, what is your reading of it? So he answered and said, You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and yourself. And he, talking to Jesus, said to him, You have answered rightly, do this, and you will live. But he, wanting to justify himself, said to Jesus, And who is my neighbor? And Jesus answered and said, A certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and fell among thieves, and stripped him of his clothing, and wounded him, and departed, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a certain priest came down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. Likewise a Levite came and passed by on the other side. But a certain Samaritan, as he journeyed, came where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion. So he went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. And he set him on his own animal, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. On the next day, when he departed, he took out 2 denarii, gave them to the innkeeper, and said to him, Take care of him, and whatever more you spend, when I come again, I will repay you. So which of these 3 do you think was neighbor to him who fell into thieves? And he said, He who showed mercy on him. Then Jesus said to him, Go, and do likewise.
Good morning.
Morning.
It's good to see you this morning. I hope you'll leave your Bibles open to Luke chapter 10. We're going to spend the bulk of our time there. We're going to try and get situated here real quick. There we go. All right, it works. I'm a little bit proud of myself just for the fact that I can actually talk this morning. And so we won't struggle quite as much as we did last week. I apologize once again for that. I have a little bit of a voice. Most of you might be happier about that. Kelsey might not be quite as happy, but it is what it is. We're going to go ahead and dive right in this morning. Part of that is because I don't quite know exactly how long we're going to be this morning. We have a lot of material to cover. And the other thing is, I've thought for a long time about how I was going to introduce this passage, this parable that most of us, at least, are probably familiar with, at least in passing. And all of us are familiar with the idea of the Good Samaritan at the very least. Even among secularists, even among people who don't claim the Bible as being anything other than a man-made document, will still use the phrase that someone was a good Samaritan when they do something good. And so I thought about all these different things that I could do as an introduction. I thought about, well, maybe I could reference Mr. Rogers and his neighborhood, right? And how he was my neighbor and I was his. And if you didn't grow up, I'm sad for our children because they won't be able to grow up on that like I was. I also thought about doing something with State Farm, just briefly, right? Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. But then I was scared that someone was going to randomly appear right next to me, and then I was going to be taken somewhere else in just a little bit. And so I decided, you know what, we're just going to get right into it. We're just going to get right into the text as it's been written, with one exception. This text is misused all the time. And I cannot get up here and talk about this text and how we should be using it without talking just a little bit at first about how it's used, I think, improperly, incorrectly within our society today. Because, you see, there are some within our society that have turned this into the social justice parable, right? That, well, the gospel is really about promoting change within our society. That is its highest aim, that it's about reforming society so that no one's mistreated, so that everyone's taken care of, and that, you know, that it promotes exactly what, well, my slide says, social justice. Not quite. You see, while there are some physical things about this particular parable that we are going to talk about. There are some physical aspects to this parable. There's very little context that's given. If Jesus had wanted to talk about social justice on this occasion, he would have given more context about this man that was robbed and say, well, he didn't deserve to be robbed or anything like that. He would have talked about some condition that existed that caused this to take place. And there are some people, some scholars even, that have looked at this passage and said, well, obviously there's there's some sort of prejudice against this man and only other marginalized people are going to take care of him. No, there wasn't. Jesus made the thing up. It's a parable. This doesn't exist in reality. Not to say that Jesus doesn't draw from experience. Not to say that Jesus doesn't draw from things that we would even see in our day-to-day lives. Certainly that's the point. But he's not trying to prove some vague point about social justice that isn't there. The thing that he teaches is exactly what he's trying to prove. And we do well not to read too much into it. And ultimately, we want to hold on to this. Jesus is addressing a spiritual concern. The Protestant John MacArthur, who, if you've ever walked into the Lifeway, about half of what they have written, scholarly book section, about half of what they have written is written by John MacArthur. Has once called parables salvation stories. The reason for that is, when you look at the parables, when you look at Jesus' parables, it's very hard to find one that doesn't have anything to do with salvation. In fact, I would contend it's impossible. And so if that's true of all other parables, if all other parables have something to do with salvation, in fact, if that's the main point that's being said, that we would do well to try and find the point about salvation within this parable. Obviously, there's something about helping people. Obviously, there's something about tending to people's physical needs that we won't overlook that this morning. But if we want to say a higher spiritual concern here, we want to do our best to find it. I think it is there. Now, let's go to the text. finally. Verses 25 through 29 sort of pose the question, right? Sort of set up the context, set up what's going to happen. And you'll notice in verse 25, this question by this lawyer, and the lawyer probably has to do with the legal, has less to do with the court of law than it does with regard to the actual old law in this case. But this lawyer poses the question saying, "Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life?" But you'll notice we already see his motivation. Sometimes in Scripture we don't get the motivation of those asking the question. Here we do. He wants to put Jesus to the test. He wants to trap Jesus. He wants to trap Jesus in his own words. Well, Jesus gives direction here. He says, "What's written in the law? How do you read it?" And if we can stop right there for just a second, I think that's a sermon in and of itself. That everything this man needs to know is written in the Word of God. There might be an issue with interpreting it. There might be an issue with how he reads it, if you will. But the answer's already there. Direction is given. And then responses are spoken in verses 27 and 28. He, the lawyer, answered, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself." And he, Jesus, said to him, "You have answered correctly. Do this and you will live." And that should be it right there. That should be the end of the story. That should be the end of the account, but it's not, because this lawyer wants to justify himself. He wants to say, "Well, look at what I have been doing. I want to compare what I've been doing to this standard and be able to say that I'm okay. I want to be able to look at this standard that's been set up, compare the things that I do against it, and say that I'm okay." And so he tries to justify himself, and he asks the question, "All right, we've been talking about neighbors. Who, in fact, is my neighbor?" And so Jesus offers a parable. Now, many of you have studied this parable several times over in your lives, and even if you haven't, you're probably vaguely familiar with it. But we're going to take the parable and we're going to break it down. We're going to take the time to do that this morning while we're here. So we move on to verse 30, and Jesus begins to speak. He begins to speak. And he says here, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell among robbers who stripped him, beat him, and departed, leaving him half dead." We have a robbed man, left for dead. There's not a lot of context to it. As we mentioned before, Jesus isn't drawing from a specific real-life example here. He's drawing from something that we might be able to observe generally for ourselves, but there's no indication as to why this man is left half for dead on the side of the road. There's no reason why robbers came after him to begin with. There's no context whatsoever. Sometimes we might look at people that are in a situation like this and say, maybe they deserve it. Maybe they did something to deserve it. That's not why. So we've got a man that's been robbed, and there's no other context to it about it. And then in verse 31, a priest walks by. Verse 31 now, "By chance a priest was going down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side." Now, if you're hearing this for the first time, especially if you're this lawyer, up until the last few words there, you might be thinking, all right, the priest is coming by. This is the end of the story. The priest who's familiar with the law, who the idea behind a priest is one who mediates between God and man. That access point for man to God. Surely he's going to do what he needs to do and love this person. No, he doesn't. Again, very little context is given why. We don't know the thought process behind the priest, except that he sees him and he goes to the other side of the road. He says, "I'm getting far away from this." And then we get to what we know is verse 32, and maybe there's some more hope again on the part of the lawyer. And Jesus says here, "So likewise a Levite," that is a Levite who's not a priest, but probably assisted the priest, not that specific priest, though. No, let's not take that too far. So likewise, a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him pass by on the other side. Here's another person who would have been familiar with the law. He would have known what the law said. Certainly, him and his piety and his righteousness would have tended to this man's needs, would have shown this man love. Except that he doesn't. Then in verse 33, but a Samaritan, as he journeyed, came to where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion. Now, many of us understand that the idea behind it, the Samaritan was kind of a mixed race Jew. They were hybrids. They were looked down upon by both Jews and non-Jews. One of the things that we miss here is that this is actually something of an insult hurled at this man. Again, a hypothetical man, if you will, but it's an insult. Jesus himself knows this because in John chapter 8, verse 48, some that are questioning him there say, are we not right in saying that you are a Samaritan and that you also have a demon? Those things are almost parallel in the eyes of the Pharisees. Those things are almost parallel. Samaritans were hated. Yeah, because we don't have any problems with, we've never had problems with racism and ethnic issues in our country or in its history ever. We can't relate to this. He's hated. What he does, he has compassion, and then in verse 34, he tends to an immediate need. He went up to him and bound up his wounds, pouring on him oil and wine. Then he set him on his own animal and brought him to an inn and took care of him. All right, I see a need. I see someone that needs to be taken care of, and I'm going to take care of them. He doesn't just take care of an immediate need here, does he? Look at verse 35. And the next day, he stayed all night. The next day, he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper, saying, take care of them, and whatever more you spend, I will repay you when I come back. Now, I would look at this in a business setting and say, this is a real easy way to get extorted. This is a real easy way to get taken advantage of. Both potentially by the man who had been robbed, as well as the innkeeper. He opens himself up to that. It's been estimated that this 2 denarii, which is representative of 2 days' wages, depending on the type of inn, would have been enough for potentially as much as 2 months' rent. Says, you know what? He needs it. So he tends to this Samaritan man who is hated in the culture in which he lives, tends to an immediate need, and then invests time and money into him. Apparently spends the night and invests 2 days worth of wages into a person. This morning, now that we've looked at this parable, I want to just draw out 2 principles. One that I think is fairly obvious, and one that is maybe less obvious. The first one, and the one that I think is fairly obvious, is the idea of neighborliness. And I'm not sure if that's a real word or one that I made up, but it's on the slide, so we're going to go with it. Neighborliness. You'll notice there's a question in verse 29. Who is my neighbor? Pick him out. Tell me. Give me a group of people. Who is my neighbor? And Jesus changes the question by the end of this account. Who is my neighbor becomes, it's a little awkwardly worded on the slide, but to whom should I be a neighbor? Who should I be a neighbor to? verse 36 and verse 37. Jesus says here, which of these three do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell among the robbers? He said, the one who showed him mercy. Jesus said to him, you go and do likewise. Jesus turns the focus inward. It's no longer about going out and saying, okay, that person's my neighbor, I better help them. That person's my neighbor, I better help them. That person's my neighbor, I better help them. Jesus has turned it into, you go and be a neighbor. You go fill that hole. So who do we be a neighbor to? Well, a quick scan of scripture will give us a few indications. To fellow Christians, 1 John chapter 3, picking up in verse 16, says, by this we know love, that he laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for the brothers. But if anyone has the world's goods and sees his brother in need, yet closes his heart against him, how does God's love abide in him? Little children, let us not love in word or talk, but in deed and in truth. John says there, do you love your brothers in Christ? Do you love your church family? Show it. One of the things we're going to talk about, at least just briefly tonight during our sermon, is the idea that fellowship involves taking care of those in our number who are in need. That is one of the church's primary responsibilities for itself, or to itself, rather. And when we love each other, when we show that love, we actually show it instead of just saying. Of course, it's not limited there. Matthew chapter 5 and verse 44 says, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute them. Man, that's hard to do sometimes. Sometimes, we'll almost joke about this from time to time, right? We'll say something to the effect of, yeah, I love that person. Maybe we're talking to another person that's not really our enemy, but we'll say something like, I love you. I don't really like you very much, but I love you. I can know that person loves me based on not what they say, but what they do for me. I can know that I love another person the same way. And then ultimately we realize, okay, fellow Christians, enemies, pretty quickly we're going to realize that, well, this is just going to include absolutely everyone. Galatians chapter 6, beginning in verse 9 says, and let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up. So then as we have opportunity, let us do good to everyone, and especially to those who are of the household of faith. Now, sometimes we'll take that last little bit to the household of faith and we'll run with it and take off way too far with that one single idea. But here Paul is saying very clearly, do good to everyone. Be sure you're taking care of those in the church, and do good to everyone. Say good things. That's important. Take care of those around you that are in need. We live in a world today where when this is done within our society, this isn't true in every single case. But I fear that when people take care of other people many times in our society, it's to make themselves look better. It's so that they can maybe go out and say, hey, I did this, I think that might be the attitude of this lawyer. He's trying to justify himself. Look at me. I stack up pretty well against the law. That brings us to our second principle. That there's danger in self-vindication. That there's danger in self-vindication. The lawyer tries to justify himself according to the law. He says in verse 25, "Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life?" Jesus responds, "What's in the law?" The lawyer rattles it right off, and Jesus says, "Look, do that and live." Jesus offers a path in which he can accomplish this, right? Jesus offers a path. He says, all right, if you want to try and justify yourself, here's how you do it. But it's a path that this lawyer cannot follow. He cannot keep the law perfectly every time. If this is perfect love, if this is perfect love that must be kept every single time to want to justify oneself against the law, the lawyer can't do it. By the way, we can't either. I can't justify myself. If we were to preach a sermon on just that one thought, we would read basically the entire book of Romans this morning. I cannot justify myself. I cannot put myself in a right standing before God. I can't do this perfectly. I can't do it perfectly every single time. Sometimes we feel good about ourselves when we do it once. And so if I can't justify myself according to the law, if I can't put myself in a right standing with God based off the love that I should be showing people on a day in and day out basis, then ultimately I have to rely on someone outside of myself. That ultimately that justification, that right standing before God, has to come from outside of myself. And ultimately, this is why it turns into something, this is why this parable becomes something more than just a good moral story about how people should act. That's a part of the parable. I don't think it's the main point. Because remember, Jesus is trying to address this specific situation. The lawyer is trying to justify himself, and Jesus is offering a scenario. We don't necessarily know how the lawyer responds outside of answering the one question. Jesus is offering a scenario in which he says, look, you can't justify yourself. Do good things, keep the law. This is how you show love. This is how you are a neighbor to other people. You can't do this perfectly each and every single time. Thankfully, you don't have to. We're going to consider Jesus for just a few moments. Jesus himself. First of all, he lived a perfect life. 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse 22 says, he committed no sin, neither was deceit found in his mouth. He showed us love. John chapter 15 and verse 13 says, greater love is no one than this, than someone lay down his life for his friends. We read 1 John 3:16 earlier, which said Jesus did exactly that. He did that for us. That's how we can know love. And then maybe most specifically this morning, what we're trying to say. In Romans chapter 20, you probably can quote, or many of you can quote verse 23, which says, for all sin and fall short of the glory of God. Please don't stop there. Verse 24 says, and are justified by his grace as a gift through the redemption that is in Christ Jesus. Parable shows me how to love people. It shows me how to care for people, regardless really of the context. There's no context given. You don't know if this man, quote unquote, deserved the robbery. It's a parable. That's not for us to know. But in showing us that, it also shows us that we can't do, we're not going to, I guess I shouldn't quite say we can't, but that we're not going to do that perfectly each and every single time. And frankly, I don't have to even use this example to tell you that, at least. I know that from my own personal experience. And I can't speak to any situation for most of you in particular specifically, but I think many of you know this from your own experience as well. Yes, we try to do good. We try to show love to people around us. We try to show love as graciously as we can. We try to help those around us, both within our own Christian family and outside of it. That's important. You'll notice once again that the man, the Samaritan, invested time and money into this man. Poured himself into this man, but in reality, we fall short of him. As great as I think that I am from time to time, I cannot save myself. I cannot justify myself because I fall short. The voice could pretty easily speak up and say, well, you remember that one time and that's it. That doesn't mean just because my justification is outside of myself, just because I can't save myself, doesn't mean that I start just living however I want to live. Jesus said in John 14:15, if you love me, keep my commandments. We continue to live faithfully. But ultimately, I realize I have to rely on Jesus. I have to submit myself to Him. And that if I'm going to be found in the right relationship with God, if I'm going to be found in a right standing with God, it's only going to be through His sacrifice. And so, this morning, does that describe you? Are you living as one who's been redeemed? If you're a Christian, are you living as one who Jesus died for? If you're not, what can we do to help you? Maybe you need prayers for something you're going through. Maybe you need to ask God's forgiveness for something that you've done, perhaps in a public way. Maybe you need encouragement to let someone know that something is wrong. Ask for help. If you'll just let us know. Maybe this morning you've not given yourself over to Jesus. You'd like to do that. You'd like to be baptized into Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection for forgiveness of your sins. We can assist you with that or anything else. Please come forward as you sing this.
Soon and very soon we are going to see the King. Soon and very soon we are going to see the King. Soon and very soon we are going to see the King. Hallelujah, hallelujah, we're going to see the King. No more crying there, we are going to see the King. No more crying there, we are going to see the King. No more crying there, we are going to see the King. Hallelujah, hallelujah, we're going to see the King. No more dying there, we are going to see the King. Hallelujah. No more dying there, we are going to see the King. Hallelujah. No more dying there, we are going to see the King. Hallelujah, hallelujah, we're going to see the King.
We're letting our closing prayer. Let's sing number 704. 704 once through. Bind us together, Lord, bind us together with cords that cannot be broken. Bind us together, Lord, bind us together, Lord, bind us together with love. There is only one God.
Bind us together, Lord, bind us together with bonds that cannot be broken. Bind us together, Lord, bind us together, Lord, bind us together with bonds.
Thankful that we have this chance to come here today, to humble ourselves before you, to look to you. The blessings that you bestow upon us. Also, Father, when I ask that you would continue to visit our loved ones, our friends that is on the prayer list, that is hurting, that needs your comfort and strength to continue on. We ask that you will continue to bless them, heal them, and return them to their former lives according to thy will. We ask, Father, that you will continue to forgive us. We also ask that we are able to forgive those around and about us, our enemies, either intentionally or unknowingly do us harm. Let us forgive them. Let us be better Christians to our neighbors. And let us help them any way we can. Also ask, Father, that you will be with those people. Hurricane is on the East Coast there. There's people that lost their lives, lost their property. We ask that you will be able to recover from that quickly. We also, Father, want to ask for the people down in the island, Haiti, and other places that have lost lives, or many lives. Be merciful and comfort them. Let them recover and serve plenty of food donated so they can have at least one meal a day. Well, times are tough down there, Father. You would bless them people abundantly. We also ask God that you would continue to bless this congregation, continue to grow spiritually comfort and strengthen them in their many injuries they suffer. And our business. We ask that they would be returned home safe.